Welcome to the relaunch of the 30-Minute Workout webinar series. My name is Jeff Bartels, and I'm an infrastructure technical specialist here at Autodesk. Today, I'm joined by my colleagues, Jerry Bartels and Angel Espinosa. As a side note, Alan Gilbert will also be participating in these sessions. However, he wasn't able to attend today. We're excited to have Angel and Alan on board, and we look forward to their insights and their unique tips, tricks, and workflows as we go forward. In addition to having some new faces on the team, we also plan on expanding our horizons and exploring more civil infrastructure applications. In the coming months, we'll be exploring everything from Civil 3D to Map 3D, InfraWorks, vehicle tracking, recap, and others. So keep an eye open for that. Today's session, we're going to look at how we can make Civil 3D corridor targeting more graphical. Now, if you're unfamiliar with the 30-minute workout concept, I'm sure you'll agree if you've ever taken a Civil 3D course in the past, there's never enough time to cover everything that the application has to offer. Usually courses focus on the need to know functionality. What do you need to know to do your job? The other tools, features, and workflows are the type of things that you just pick up over a lifetime using the application. So we put together these workouts as a way to have an opportunity to demonstrate some of these lesser discussed features and provide a resource for folks using Civil 3D in this case, such that they can make the most of their Autodesk investment. We have a couple of ground rules for the sessions. First of all, the examples that we show are going to be abstract in nature, and we do that on purpose. By looking at things in an abstract way, we can focus solely on how a tool functions. Once you understand how a tool works, you can apply it in whatever situation works best for you. Since we're only together for 30 minutes, we will always start on time and end on time. No need to worry about taking notes. These sessions are always recorded. Anybody who has registered for the session will get access to a recording. If you have questions during the session, go ahead and put those in the Q&A pane. Jerry and Angel will be fielding those as we go. If there are any remaining questions, we will address those at the end. In the event we don't have time and there are questions left, we will get back to you with an answer. One more thing, if you'd like to have a one-on-one follow-up call with one of us regarding the topics that we talk about during these sessions, go ahead and put that in the chat area. We always enjoy scheduling those sessions and speaking with other users. Just a quick agenda for today's session. We're going to start out by looking at how we can make the section editor work harder for us. In hindsight, that may have been a better title for this session because that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to look at how we can make our targets and potential targets display within the section editor. Things like alignments and profiles, feature lines, and survey figures. To do that, we'll look at how we can optimize the section editor settings. We'll be adjusting the viewport display. We'll look at how we can control the properties of the grid. I'll also show you how you can save those settings to a template if you'd like to use those in future drawings. We'll look at how we can optimize some of the object styles in Civil 3D to predictably display potential targets within the section editor. And then I will show you how we can adjust the display of those items using toggles. Finally, I've got bonus content there. I've kind of held a few things back. In the event we get to everything on that list that I want to talk about today, we can always get into the bonus items. If not, we can just push those bonus items to a future session. As always, this is going to be a PowerPoint free zone. We will be working live in the application for the duration of our time together today. All right, our housekeeping is taken care of. Let me drop out of this. As you can see, I am working in Civil 3D 2022. Having said that, everything that we look at today is going to work regardless of the version of Civil 3D that you happen to be using. I'm going to start by doing a quick tour of this drawing. In this file, I've got an existing ground surface called EG, and I have a corridor model representing a simple roadway design. If you zoom in here, we can see that I've got some alignments in this file. I've got an alignment called Road A that represents the center line. I also have a pair of alignments that represent the left and right-of-way geometry. If we pan the drawing over, we can see the profiles that I've created for the center line of the road. Here's my finished grade profile, and here's my surface profile that I sampled. If I pan the drawing up, we can see here the assembly that I'm using for my corridor. Generally speaking, it's a pair of lanes. I've got a shoulder on either side, and I've got a daylight max width that I'm using on either side. Let's pan the drawing up. So all those items come together to create this corridor model. Currently, my corridor is displayed using kind of a minimalist approach. I like to call this a plottable style. I'm basically just showing the longitudinal geometry of this corridor. Since the corridor is selected, if I wanted to, I could come over here and change its style to kind of a working style so that we could see the assembly insertions in there. That's what I would typically do if I was editing my corridor. But to keep things simple on screen, I'm going to go with more of a plottable style for right now. You can see the longitudinal geometry that I'm displaying is basically the edge of traveled way. I've got the edge of the paved shoulder, and I've got a dashed line here that represents the limits of my daylight. So we were going to be talking about targeting today. Let's target something. I'm going to open my layer list, and I've got a layer here called Target Alignment. I'm going to turn that on. On this layer, I have an offset alignment. I would like to use this offset alignment to drive the width of my right lane in the roadway here. To assign that target, I am going to select my corridor, and then from the contextual ribbon, I'll choose Edit Targets. I will then click within this region. This is the region I want to edit. I just have the one region in this case. This will be a width target, so I will look in that category of settings, and I'm going to find the lane on the right side, and I would like to map that to an alignment, and I'll choose my offset alignment. Now, even if you can't remember the name of the alignment, we can always use the green block here, and we can pick the alignment on screen. Let's click Add to add that as a target, and then I'll click OK and OK. And when I do, you can see how my corridor is updated. It's now using that target to drive the width of the right lane. Now that I've made those adjustments, let's take a look at the section editor. The corridor is still selected. I'm going to come up to the contextual ribbon, and I'll bring up the section editor. And we'll take a closer look at some of the things that we can see here. Notice that in addition to my corridor, I'm also seeing my alignment geometry, and it has a consistent look and feel as the alignment that we see here in the plan view. Same goes for my offset alignment. Same goes for my profiles. You can see there's my proposed profile and my existing ground surface profile that are associated with this centerline alignment. By having these display, it gives me a more visual approach to my targeting. I'm going to lock my view here. I just pan this down. Let me open this menu, and I'll choose Zoom to an offset and elevation. That'll kind of lock this view on screen. As I step through the assembly insertions now, if you remember that alignment takes and widens things. As I come over, you can see how the lane moves over. So in addition to seeing the lane move, I can also see the target that it's following. I can hover over that and get the name of it if I want. So this allows me to see my targeting in context with my corridor when I'm viewing it in the section editor. So it helps me. It also helps anybody that comes along behind me that may get into this drawing and not be familiar with it. They can have all these visual cues to understand which objects are targeting which linear or profiles, things like that. Let's take this a little bit further. Let me also mention here, I know that this target happens to be width only, because if there were profiles associated with this alignment, I would see the symbols, much like I see over here. Let's create some profiles for this alignment, just as an example. I'm going to select my widening there, and from the contextual ribbon, I'll choose Surface Profile. I'd like to use this alignment to sample the existing ground surface. I'll click Draw on Profile View, Create Profile View, and then I will place the profile view over here to the right. So there's my surface profile for that right side lane. Let's create a finished grade profile for this as well. I'm going to select the grid, and from the ribbon, I'll choose Profile Creation Tools. I'll keep the default settings here, and I'll click OK. I'm just going to create a simple proposed profile in this case. Let me zoom in, and we'll start the finished grade a little bit higher than the existing. And then I'll come down and we'll set a PVI. And then I'll come down and I'll place this to the end. There we go. After making those profiles, let's go right back to the section editor. If I select my corridor and come back to section editor, immediately you can see those profiles are now displaying as part of this alignment. Let's now tie the edge of pavement here. We'll tie that to that finished grade elevation. I'm going to target that. If I select my corridor and go to Edit Targets, I can click inside this region. That's what I want to edit. And this is going to be an elevational target in this case. So I'm going to look for the lane on the right side, and I would like to map that to a profile that's associated with my offset alignment. We'll tie that to the finished grade profile. Let me click Add and OK and OK. Corridor updates. If we go back into the section editor, it's very easy to see now as I step through my sections. As I step through my sections, not only can I see that that lane is following that alignment from its width, for its width property, I can see that it's getting its elevation from that profile. Okay, very, very easy looking at this, a very visual approach, graphical approach. It allows me to see my targets and potential targets in context with my design. What I'd like to do for the remainder of our session, I'm going to show you how we can set this up in Civil 3D. So let me close the section editor. And I'm sure that all of us have different template settings. Everybody's template settings are always a little bit different. So what I've done, I'm going to jump to a different drawing here. This is basically the same drawing, but I went through and assigned all of the settings that I would need to accomplish that prior workflow. I assigned all the default settings. So this is going to force me to go through and have to make changes to those. And by doing this, it'll show you everything that you need to know to set this up on your end, should you want to do that. All right. First thing I'm going to do, we'll take a look at the section editor. I'm going to select my corridor, and then from the contextual ribbon, I'll bring up the section editor. What we see on screen is the default settings that we get when it comes to the section editor if we're using Civil 3D right out of the box. You can see the viewport configuration is using 4 views. Personally, I'm not one that likes to or necessarily needs to see the assembly when I'm editing my corridor. So this is a view that for me is unnecessary. Everybody's got their own personal preferences, but let me show you how I can configure this and eliminate this extra view. In the section editor, if I come up to the View Tools panel, I can choose Viewport Configuration. This is how we can control the way the screen is divvied up. On the left side of the screen here in the layout menu, we've got some preloaded settings. I'm going to choose 3 above. This gives me a nice large viewport on top, viewport 1. I'm going to say I want viewport 1 to display my section. And then viewport 2 in the lower left, I want that to view the plan view. And viewport 3 in the lower right, I want this to view my profile. When I click OK, we can see that looks a little bit better. I'd like to make another adjustment. Currently, the grid that we see in the section view is using the default settings that you get out of the box with Civil 3D. I'd like to adjust this because, in my opinion, the grid is a little bit aggressive. It's kind of hard to see my geometry as I zoom in and out. The grid squares change and things like that. So I'm going to show you some adjustments that we can make that I believe makes this a little bit easier to see. When we're in the section editor, in the View Tools panel, I'm going to choose View Edit Options. This is where we can adjust the properties of this section view, particularly the grid. And let me also reiterate the changes that I make here are my own personal preferences. You can adjust yours however you like. First setting I'm going to change is the adaptive grid. That's what allows the grid squares to resize as we zoom in and out. I'm going to turn that feature off. When I come down, we can see the properties for the major and minor grid lines. Currently, in my opinion, I believe those are a little too bright. So I'm going to set the minor grid lines to 252. We'll make those darker. Major grid lines, going to set those to 252 as well. Display the center axis. I really don't need to see the center axis. This will compete with my alignment geometry, so I'm going to say no in that case. Center axis color, doesn't matter because we're not displaying it. Text color, that's the labels around the outside. These are a little bright. I'm going to push these back. We'll make those 252. And then text height. My eyes are getting a little old, so I'm going to make the text larger. We'll make that 3%. And then a couple more things. If we come down to the bottom here, we can see the color of the sliders that are used here in plan view and profile. I can see that in the plan view, it's white, and in the profile view, it's yellow. Those have good contrast. One of the nice things about the settings that we see here, they're not plottable. So you can go through and pick out the properties that look best on screen. Let's click OK. And when I do, I can see that looks much better, in my opinion, than it did before. I've got much better contrast now. I can still see the grid. I can still see the numbers. And I've got a much nicer view of my corridor and my existing ground surface. Let's close the section editor. From now on, whenever I'm working in this drawing, every time I return to the section editor, it's going to show me the settings that I've assigned. After seeing that, you may be wondering, well, that works great, but what if I want to assign those settings to my template? How can we do that? I'm going to open a template drawing here quickly. Let's just go to Open, and I'll select DWT. I'm going to grab the default template that comes with Civil 3D. So normally we get into the section editor by selecting a corridor. I obviously don't have a corridor here in my template, but what I can do, I can go to the Modify Ribbon tab. I can say I want to modify a corridor. And here in the contextual ribbon, if I click the bottom half of the section editor icon, from here, I can jump into the viewport configuration. You can see how it defaults to the 4 views. I can also go to the same place to bring up the view edit options. So here's where I can dial up the settings I'd like to use for the section editor, save those as part of my template, and they will apply to all future drawings that are created. Let's close this. and I'm going to return to my file. Let's bring back the section editor again. So now that we have a good view of our corridor, let's look at how we can view alignments. How can we make our alignments display within the section editor? To do that, I am going to edit my alignment style. And there's a lot of ways you can edit styles in Civil 3D. If you come over to the settings tab here for alignments, for instance, if you know where it is, you can go to alignment styles and find it and double click to make changes. Otherwise, even quicker, I can select the alignment from here, right click, and from the ribbon, I can say, let's edit the style that's assigned to this alignment. This is considered an object style. All object styles in Civil 3D have a display tab. This controls the display of the object. And when it comes to alignments, if I come down to the components, you can see the components that make up the alignment: line, curve, spiral, extensions, warning symbols. I can control what's visible, and I can control the layer property and the general properties. Notice that when it comes to these styles, they are dependent on view. The settings that I have here are perfect for the plan view, which is what we see down here. I'm going to open view direction, and I'm going to say that I would like to control how this alignment is viewed from a section view, which is what we have here. I'm going to say that I would like the alignment to be visible, and I'm going to use the same layer properties that are being used in the plan view, just to keep things consistent. So I will come down to PR, proposed centerline road. I'll grab that layer and click OK. Everything else is by layer. Let's click apply. Okay, looking good. Looks very similar to what I have. The only thing I'm not seeing is the line type. It's taking the line type from the layer. The biggest difference that we have here is this distance is quite a bit shorter than the distances that we see down here. So to make the line type show up, I need to set the LT scale a little bit smaller. I'm going to make this 0.05 as an example. And when I click OK, you can see how that now shows up here. So this gives me a nice visual cue that I can identify that alignment in both places. And you can feel free to adjust the LT scale to whatever settings work best for you. If I wanted to do the same thing for my offset alignment, I could grab this, right click, edit alignment style. You can see from a plan view, the layers that I'm using. From a section view, just to make this a little bit faster, I've already grabbed the layer. All I have to do is turn that on. When I click OK, that now displays. Let's do, as long as we're at it, let's do one more. We'll do the right-of-way geometry. I'll grab the right-of-way alignment. I'll right-click and say Edit Alignment Style. We can see the layers being used there for the plan view. I'll go to Section. As courtesy, I jumped in and did that already. I'm just going to turn these on. I've already set the LT scale for these, and when I click OK and back up, you can see my right-of-way alignments are displaying. So just by adjusting the alignment properties or the alignment style, you can control which alignments will show up in your section editor. So this, I've done it in this drawing. You can also do this in your template if you want it to be this way in future drawings. Now that we've seen how to do alignments, let's look at how to do profiles. How can I make profiles display in the section editor? To do that, I am going to adjust the profile layer, object style. I will select the profile here. Once again, I could come find it over here if I want to, but even faster, I can grab the profile, right click and say Edit Profile Style. Just like with an alignment, this is an object style. It has a display tab. We can see that the display properties here for all of the components of our profile. Currently, it's set for the profile view direction, which is what we see here. I can see the layers that are being used for the various components. I would like to use similar settings for when this profile is viewed in section view. So I'll choose section view and I'll set that to visible. And then I'm going to pick the same layer. We'll come down and we'll grab that PR road centerline profile and I'll click OK. At this point, if I click apply, notice nothing happens. All I've really done here is I've said, you know, the layer settings and the properties that I would like my symbol to have or my marker to have. Where do we set the marker? We do that using this markers tab. If you've ever created a profile style before, you know, the markers tab is typically used to control the markers that you see here in the profile view. We can set markers at the PVI locations, at the beginning and ending of the profile, places like that. If I drag this all the way to the bottom, I have the opportunity to assign a marker for when this profile is displayed in section view. So I'm going to come down to marker style. Let me click. This is where I can assign a marker style. I'm going to create a brand new one. Let's look at that. I'll open the menu here and I'll choose Create New. I want to make a brand new style. For the name, I'm going to call this ADSK dash profile, and then in brackets, I'll write section editor. So I'll know what this is used for. I'll go to the marker tab. This is where I can control the appearance of the marker. I can create a marker using an AutoCAD point, or I can toggle these items here to create a custom marker. If I have a block in the file, I could use that for a marker. All of those are possible opportunities we have there. I'm going to choose use custom marker, and I'm going to choose the X and the circle. We can adjust the rotation here if we want to. For the size of this marker, I'm going to leave this set to drawing scale. And remember, in the view here, this geometry is quite small, so I'm going to use a small size. I'm going to make this 0.0125 inches. One more thing, let's go to the display tab. A marker style can also be controlled visually, display-wise for the different views. So it's kind of like having a style within a style. What I'm going to do is for this marker, I'm going to go to the display tab, and I'm going to say in the section view, I want the marker to be visible. And then for the properties, I'm going to leave this set to layer 0. And then all of the other properties, I'm going to set to by layer. Any one that I can, I'm going to set to by layer. I do this because when you create a marker like this, markers work just like a traditional AutoCAD block. Now, AutoCAD block, if you ever created a block, we may do a couple sessions on blocks here in the future. If you draw your geometry on layer 0 and you convert that geometry into a block, that block will assume the properties of any layer that it's inserted on. So rather than having 10 identical block symbols that all have different properties for colors, we can create one universal block by drawing it on layer 0, and it will assume the properties of the layer that it's inserted on. Put it on a red layer, it'll be red. Put it on a layer with a dash line type, it'll have a dash line type. That's basically what I'm saying here. I'm making this a universal marker. I'm saying it'll be as though it was drawn on layer 0. Let me click OK. And OK. So I've chosen the marker that I want to use in the profile view. If I go to the display tab here, this is where the marker is going to get the display properties. When I click OK and zoom in, we can see how that profile now displays in the section editor. We could do the same thing for the existing profile. I'm going to right click on that and say Edit Profile Style. For the view direction of section, I've already set the layer for that. Let me just turn that to visible. And for the marker, I'm going to come down and I'm going to choose that universal marker that I just made. We'll go to Autodesk Profile Section Editor. There we go. So it's a universal style that's going to assume the properties that I've assigned right here. When I click OK, now I can see that profile and it has a consistent look and feel to what we can see here in the profile view. Okay, just by doing that, I can very easily see alignments and profiles displayed within the section editor, and it's easier to tell if I have objects that are targeting those. Now, after seeing that, let me close this. After seeing that, you may be saying, well, that works great, but there are other objects that we can target. I can target feature lines. I can also target survey figures. How can I get those to show up? We'll look at that. I have got a layer in this file that's got a feature line on it. I'm going to turn that on. And let me drag the drawing over. So here I've got a feature line. It's using the style grading edge. And I would like to use this feature line as a target for my daylighting. Let's do that. I'm going to select the corridor, and then I will come up and choose Edit Targets. I'd like to edit targets in this region. And this is going to be a width target. So I will find the daylight on the right side of the road, and I would like to map that to a feature line. And I'll choose the feature line from the drawing. I'll select that. I'll click OK and OK, which updates my corridor. You can see how it's now tied to that feature line geometry. Knowing that, we're going to go back to the section editor, and I am going to drag this slider over just before we get to that feature line. And let's zoom this in, and we'll use the zoom to an offset and elevation to kind of lock that view on screen. As I step through the assembly insertions now, eventually, once we get to right there, we can see that it's targeting that feature line, but it would be nice if I could see a symbol for that. Then I'd be able to identify what it's targeting here in the section editor view. To display that feature line, we're going to use a similar workflow. I'm going to come down and select the feature line. I'll right click. And from here, I'll choose Edit Feature Line Style. If you remember, the feature line style that's being used is called grading edge. This is an object style as well. Feature lines are a little more complex than an alignment or a profile. Alignments or profiles are considered 2D. Feature line is 3D, so it actually supports more view directions. We can see from the plan view, the feature line geometry is visible, and this is the property of the geometry, and we can see the other properties there. If I come down to section, I can say I want, in a section view, I would like to see a crossing marker. Notice, though, that these items are grayed out. It won't let me adjust these. Anytime that you see settings like this associated with a component in Civil 3D, it means these settings are controlled someplace else, or they must be controlled someplace else. Let's keep that in mind. For right now, we're just going to turn that on. Let's go to the Section tab. This is where I can pick the marker that I'd like to use, much like we did with a profile. So here's the marker style. I'm going to come down and select that same universal marker that we looked at a second ago. Let me choose that, and I'm going to click Edit. And then from the Display tab, I'll set this to Section. So if you remember, on the Display tab for the feature line, it didn't let us adjust those properties. It said those properties need to be controlled someplace else. Well, one place I could control it is here. I could take and assign those properties here on the marker. Now, I don't want to do it with this marker because I'm already using this marker for my profiles. I'd have to create another style, and I could assign the properties here, and that would work. If, however, I'd like to continue to use this universal option, basically I'm saying assume the properties of the layer you're inserted on. Let's do that. Let me click OK. And this particular feature line style isn't letting me assign those styles. The styles are then defined by the object layer that the feature line is sitting on. Let me show you that. Let's click OK. You can see the marker displays. If I come over to my layer settings here, we can see it even better down here. If I hover over the feature line, you can see the layer that it's sitting on. Target feature line. Here with my layer settings, I can set this to, maybe we'll set the layer to yellow. Okay, or if I set this to green. Okay, a little different than a profile, but not difficult. Just understanding of where you're going to assign those properties. You can assign it at the marker level, or you can take and assign it or have it assigned automatically based on the layer that the feature line is sitting on. One more thing, if we wanted to talk about survey figures, the workflow is going to be similar. Here on the Settings tab, I don't have a survey figure in this drawing, but if I come down to Survey, Figures, Figure Styles, if I double-click to edit this figure style, on the Display tab, if we go to the Section View Direction, you can see it's the same. I can just determine the markers visible, but you can see I don't have access to adjust its properties. So the properties would have to be controlled elsewhere. I would either control them here at the marker level. I could control them here with the marker. In fact, I could use the same marker here that we did if I want to do it universal. If I choose to do it universal, then I would be controlling these settings based on the layer that the survey figure is sitting on. Okay, one more thing. As you add items to the section view, you can see I've done this for just a couple targets. You may have some concerns. Well, in a complex design, I may have a lot of items on screen. Maybe this could get busy. If it does, that's what this setting is for. If we come up to the View Tools panel, I can open Display Objects. And here's where I have a very granular list of settings that I can control what displays in the section editor. For instance, I can turn off all the alignments. You can see the alignments no longer display. I can go through and I can also turn off profiles and feature lines. How about we turn off the profiles and feature lines and I only want to see the offset alignments? Let me click OK. You can see those display on the screen. All right, so by adopting this approach, we can go through if we want to and control the display of those objects, those targets and potential targets on a more granular level. Okay, we are dangerously close to the top of the hour. Let me jump back to my PowerPoints. So during today's session, we looked at how we could make the section editor work harder for us. I showed you how you can actually have your targets and potential targets displaying in the section editor, things like alignments, profiles, feature lines. We also saw how we could do it with survey figures. We looked at how we could optimize the section editor by adjusting the viewport configuration and the properties of the grid. I showed you how you could adjust those settings and save those to a template for future use. We also looked at how we could optimize the styles of the object styles within Civil 3D so we could predictably display alignments and profiles and feature lines and things like that within the section editor. And then I showed you how you could adjust the display toggles in the section editor to have granular control over those individual items. Okay, due to the interest of time, I'm going to say that any questions that have not yet been answered during today's session, we will get back to you with an answer. Let me say on behalf of Jerry Bartels, Angel Espinosa, Alan Gilbert, and myself, I want to say thank you so much for coming today. We really value your time. We hope that you find value in these sessions, and we look forward to seeing you guys again in a couple of weeks. Thanks.